ulo. Walang turuan, dapat ang tulungan dahil yun ang pinakamaigi. Hugas kamay sa lababo, hindi sa paninisi, habaan ng pisi. Basahin mo mabuti, nakita mo balita bago mo ikalat, dapat manigurado. Pag hindi ka naging responsable, magigimit siya ng bagong pagkatalo. Simulan mo sa'yo ang pagbabago, pangako sa'yo may mababago. Kapag ang tama, minamasama, iba ka nalang layunin, hindi yung mga tao. Basta't sumunod ka, kumonsulta, saka mong pumunta, dapat nga malugod ka. Dahil may mga taong handang ialik at ilang buhay para hindi ka madapuan ng sakit. Wala yung kapalit upang yung makamit, di ka sa buhay dito sa kalagitnaan ng panahon ng krisis, hindi dapat ibinawaglit. Saludo sa mga frontline ng ating bayan, di lang sila, lahat tayo ay may kinalaman. Huwag mo hayaang malantakan na parang halaman, binigyan mo ang iyong sarili ng kaalaman. Wala munang hahawak ng bola, beso-beso kay lolo't lola. Baka hindi lang paggalang ang maipasa mo, coronavirus. Iwan sa labas ang nice shoes, imbis na magchichirya, right foot, veg and fruits. At kapag nasunod mo ng lahat, ikaw ay alanganin. Alanganin na kontrol, idaan mo na sa panalangin. Nakakalimang napapahamak, tandaan mong di ka dapat na matakot. Dapat sumunod ka sa kanyang utos, sa dakilang manggagamot.
It says the best defense is still containment.
We are in uncharted territory.
Silent volume 450. If I want to 100%. Standing by. Consumption eh.
This program is brought to you by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of this pandemic. As the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Here are tonight's news. First, in the Philippines, evacuees are seeking shelter at a school as Typhoon Vongfong or Ampon forces complicated and risky evacuations for tens of thousands of people staying home due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Children and their families are packing belongings and staying in temporary shelters while waiting for the storm to pass. Take a look.
Saka kulang kami ngayon ng face mask, kaya yung mga walang face mask, gumawa na lang ng panyo, gawa ng paraan kung paano para makaiwas sa COVID. Kasi yung panahon natin ngayon, may bagyo pa, may COVID po.
At least 200,000 people live in coastal areas or flimsy homes in the province near where the storm called Typhoon Vongfong made landfall with fierce winds and heavy rain. Tens of millions more live along the typhoon's path, which is expected to take it near the densely populated capital Manila because of the twin threat of the storm and the virus. Evacuation centers in the central Philippines will only accept half their capacity, and evacuees will have to wear face masks. The surge of people and limited space mean authorities have asked 47 big churches in the area to accept people fleeing the typhoon, which is the first of the season. Vongfong is packing gusts of up to 190 kilometers or 120 miles an hour, as well as drenching rains that could cause flooding and landslides, according to the National Weather Agency or PAGASA. Areas in the typhoon's path are under varying levels of virus quarantine, yet many people are staying home to avoid infection. The Philippines has already reported 772 deaths and 11,618 cases of the virus. Meanwhile, LGUs or local government units will see to it that social distancing is observed in the possible evacuation of vulnerable residents as Typhoon Ambo or Vongfong made landfall in eastern Visayas. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said local officials must ensure that social distancing on a per-family basis would be observed. Take a look.
Plan listo, sapat-sapat na po ang ating mga relief goods, handa na po ang ating mga evacuation centers at ipapatupad po ang social distancing on a per family basis. So yan naman po ay pinaghandaan na ng mga otoridad. At sanay na naman po tayo pagdating sa contingencies na dahil po sa mga bagyo.
The coronavirus may never go away and populations will have to learn to live with it just as they have HIV. The World Health Organization warns as the global death toll from the disease in years, 300,000. Take a look.
There's a long way to go before there's going to be any bells unrung in this response. So I think we need to be clear about that. Countries, as you've seen, are trying to find a path out and a path towards a new normal, as many people have put it. And we're going to be on that pathway for a long time. And as we've seen in some countries, even a small recurrence of disease can cause the need for a serious response in terms of the public health response. If you can get the day-to-day case number down to the lowest possible level and get as much virus out of the community as possible, then when you open, you will tend to have less transmission or much less risk. If you reopen in the presence of a high degree of virus transmission, then that transmission may accelerate. If that virus transmission accelerates and you don't have the systems to detect it, it will be days or weeks before you know something's gone wrong. And by the time that happens, you're back into a situation where your only response is another lockdown. And I think this is what we all fear. Very, very smart people are saying on the economic side that the worst thing that can happen is if we come out of a lockdown and then we don't do the health part right and we go back into a lockdown, that has more danger for the economic system than it actually has for the health system in a sense. Because you can imagine that if the health system gets time to recover, then it can cope with another rise in cases. And the health system can probably do that a few times. I'm not sure how many times the economic system can do that. So I do think this isn't an either-or, and we should not be waiting to see if opening of lockdowns has worked by counting the cases in the ICUs or counting the bodies in the morgue. That is not the way to know something has gone wrong. The way to know that the disease is coming back is to have community-based surveillance, to be testing, and to know the problem is coming back, and then be able to adjust your public health measures accordingly. Let us not go back to a situation where we don't know what's happening until our hospitals are overflowing. That is not a good way to do business. And if you're a scientist and you project forward in the absence of a vaccine and you try and calculate how long is it going to take for enough people to become infected so that this disease settles into an endemic phase, and we may never, and I think it's important to put this on the table, this virus may become just another endemic virus in our communities, and this virus may never go away.
The long-term care facilities. How could this happen? Is it because
Date to that, the number of lives lost worldwide in the coronavirus pandemic is nearing 300,000, according to Johns Hopkins University figures, with 297,197 deaths reported, and there are 4,347,015 confirmed infections. To Thailand now, Phuket Airport is to reopen for domestic flights starting May 16. Joining us live from Phuket is Mary Grace Alvarez. Hello, Mary Grace.
Hello, Alma. Good evening, and to all our viewers.
Good evening, Mary Grace. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Pleasure. So here is the headlines in Phuket. Phuket International Airport has been approved to reopen to limited domestic flights after midnight this Friday night by order of Dr. Chula Sukmanu, Director of the Civil Aviation Authority of Thailand. The order allows Phuket Airport to resume limited domestic flights from 1 a.m. on May 16. The order by CCAT was issued this afternoon that Phuket Airport must adhere to the schedule of operating hours already stipulated for other airports in the country that resume limited domestic services on May 1. Phuket Airport has been closed since April 3 with a ban on all flights except government and or military aircraft, emergency landings, technical landing aircraft without passengers leaving the plane, aircraft providing humanitarian or medical aid, cargo aircraft, and any aircraft granted permission to repatriate foreigners to their home countries. Airlines providing flights to Phuket must adhere to strict health guidelines also already stipulated by CAAT. The notice by Dr. Tula noted that the reopening of the airport follows the request by the Phuket governor with the approval of the Phuket Communicable Disease Committee announced yesterday, May 13. Passengers arriving in Phuket must complete a form detailing their personal medical history to be submitted to officers at the airport. In addition to that, passengers will have to install the More China app on their phones so officials can follow up on disease investigation. The app is available on Google Play Store and App Store, and they must observe a home quarantine. The Airports of Thailand management team at Phuket Airport held a meeting this afternoon to prepare for the reopening. That meeting followed Phuket Vice Governor inspecting the airport on Tuesday, May 12, to confirm its readiness to reopen. Alma?
All right, thank you very much. Excited to hear more updates from Phuket. Mary Grace, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alma. Reporting live from Phuket, Thailand, this is Mary Grace Alvarez, and we live in interesting times.
Over to Japan, Prime Minister Abe Shinzo lifted a state of emergency imposed due to the coronavirus for the majority of the country, but kept it in place for top cities like Tokyo and Osaka. Tyra Lu joins us live from Japan. Hello, Tyra.
Sorry, Ty. This is Dennis.
This
Good
is
evening,
Dennis.
Alma.
Okay. Hello, Dennis.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Yes, good
All
evening
right.
to all our televiewers. Here are the updates, Alma.
Okay.
Japan lifts virus state of emergency in most regions. Japan's Prime Minister on Thursday lifted for most of the country a state of emergency imposed to tackle the coronavirus but kept in place for Tokyo and Osaka. 39 of the country's 47 prefectures has its lockdown lifted as the spread of the novel coronavirus in these areas has been kept in check, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Thursday. Urban regions such as Tokyo and Osaka, however, will remain under the state of emergency to ensure newly reported cases continue to fall and the burden on hospital eases. Economic Revitalization Minister Yasutoshi Nishimura said the total number of reported cases has been falling in the 39 prefectures. He also said they have sufficient capacity to provide medical care. The 39 prefectures include 5, Ibaraki, Ishikawa, Gifu, Aichi, and Fukuoka, that were classified as requiring special caution due to their large number of coronavirus cases. Those that will remain under the state of emergency are Hokkaido, the Tokyo metropolitan area, also encompassing Chiba, Kanagawa, and Saitama, as well as Kyoto, Osaka, and Hyogo. The state of emergency will be reassessed around May 21st. The declaration may be lifted in areas where the outbreak is subsiding or reimposed if there are signs of cases rising again. Meanwhile, Japan will create a framework to inject capital into large and mid-sized companies struggling amid the coronavirus pandemic. A panel of ruling party lawmakers began a series of meetings on Wednesday to work out the details and discuss other ideas to forestall bankruptcies. Japan is on the cusp of a deep recession as the pandemic has forced households to stay home and businesses to shut down. Yoichi Miyazawa, chairman of the panel, said last month that the government and central bank may need to set up a special purpose vehicle to inject capital into companies hit by the pandemic. Under the scheme, state-affiliated lenders will invest in ailing companies by offering subordinated loans or accepting preferred shares. Investment by the government will help companies strengthen their financial standing, which would allow them to borrow money from banks more easily and avoid downgrades to their credit ratings. Big companies in key industries, including auto giants like Toyota Motor Corporation, have suffered slumping profits. The government has said it will use all available tools to help Japan's car and auto parts makers hit by supply chain disruptions. The Bank of Japan also plans to hold an emergency policy meeting as early as this month to set up a reward plan for financial institutions that boost lending to small firms hurt by the coronavirus. This is the latest for now. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you, Dennis, for your updates. We'll see you back tomorrow for more. Thank you very much for your time.
Reporting from Tokyo, Japan Live, this is Dennis Lu. We live in interesting times.
To London now, people there got more freedom to leave their homes, including to go to work, the first stage of an easing of the 7-week coronavirus lockdown. Now, the London transport were busier, too, with the easing of restrictions. We have a report coming in live from Aribel Celestino. Hello, Aribel.
Hi, Alma. Here is an update in the United Kingdom. People living in England got more freedom on Wednesday to leave their homes, including going to work, the first stage of an easing of the 7-week coronavirus lockdown. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says a huge amount of work is being done to prevent overcrowding on public transport. Let's listen in.
right, and I don't want to see crowding on mass transit, public transport in our capital or anywhere else, and we're working very actively with TfL to ensure that what we do is we have more capacity, we discourage people from going to work during the peak, and that the operators, in particular TfL, lay on particularly more tube trains when those are necessary throughout the day, and a huge amount of work is being done. We also want to see proper marshalling at stations to prevent crowding of trains.
The partial lifting of restrictions comes despite the concern that Britain has the second highest death toll from the virus in the world, and confusion about the new rules. More than 36,000 people have died, and there are still high mortality rates in care homes, despite an overall downward trend in cases, deaths, and hospital admissions. Under the new guidelines, which do not apply in Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has urged millions unable to work from home to return to their jobs. Transport Minister Grant Shapps says to those returning to their workplace to cycle or walk if possible. But in London, traffic was heavier, and Transport for London said passenger numbers on the Underground were up 8.7% up on the same time last week. At Canning Town train station in East London, people, some with face coverings but many without, were seen queuing during rush hour. Elsewhere, full double-decker buses were seen plying the streets. Alma?
So how is the partial lifting of the restrictions being received by the citizenry in London?
Well, the government is being criticized for sending mixed messages about opening up, while the daily death toll still hovers around 500. Critics point out that while people are allowed to welcome cleaners and nannies into their homes, family members and loved ones are still banned. Some politicians are accusing Johnson of risking weeks of progress in tackling the virus by reopening too soon. In the meanwhile, unions have warned of a recipe for chaos in the workplace as employers try to accommodate returning workers while complying with social distancing rules. Others have claimed that lower paid, lower skilled workers in sectors such as constructions and manufacturing are being put more at risk, rather than white-collar staff who are being able to stay at home. More mixed signals from the government saying there's no end to lockdown, but asking everyone to go back to work, added John Phillips, Acting General Secretary of the GMB Union. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you very much, Aribel, and excited to hear more updates over there in London. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Alma. Reporting from the United Kingdom, I am Aribel Celestino, and we live in interesting times.
The health ministry in Spain said the country must stay in phase 0. Joining us live from Barcelona is Marco Alipio. Hello, Marco. Welcome to the program. Hi, Marco. Can you hear me?
Hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. So what are your updates from Spain, Marco? Okay, Marco, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Okay, go ahead. So,
Yes, so as per now, there are 271,095 COVID-19 cases here in Spain, 27,104 deaths, and 183,227 recorded cases. Spain has areas that are still not ready to begin to de-escalate confinement conditions, although specific measures are being prepared in coming days for Barcelona and the metropolitan area. The reasons why these areas must not proceed to phase one is because they didn't meet the criteria set out by the Central Health Ministry. The Madrid region was also rejected to move to phase one by the government. Only the regions of Lleida, Girona, and Catalonia Central are ready to move to the next phase, according to the decision taken by the Procicat, the technical committee that is in charge of coordinating the region's response to the pandemic. Alba Vergés, the chief of health ministry in Spain, said that, and I quote, "We have to do a lot of work to present adequate proposals in these areas. It's not a question of isolating anyone, but rather than taking into account territorial differences and the way that people live in each one. We'll see which date is the most appropriate, but we don't want to go too many days more. We want to move forward and see how we can recover life with the necessary prudence. The involvement of council is key. The decisions are not just based on epidemiological risk, but also the capacity to treat cases, to see whether we assume more risk or not. The ability to monitor new cases, this is what makes us decide, said Vergés. And here are the list of regions that proceeded to phase one. Andalucía, Aragón, Asturias, Baleares, Canarias, Cantabria, Castilla-León, Castilla-La Mancha, and some parts of Catalonia like Tarragona, Camp de Tarragona, Alt Pirineo Orán. Comunidad Valenciana, Ceuta, Extremadura, Galicia, La Rioja, Melilla, Murcia, Navarra, and País Vasco. Meanwhile, a study released by the government, only 5% of Spain's population has been infected by the novel coronavirus, though that figure climbs to more than 10% in Madrid and areas in the center of the country. The study launched on April 27th was based on serology tests to show exposure to coronavirus and took samples from 60,000 people. Some studies have shown that a portion of people infected by the virus will show no symptoms, but can still transmit the disease. The Spanish study confirmed that the virus circulated in the center of the country, which paid the highest price in fatalities. The study said in Madrid, the rate of infection was 11.3%. In Barcelona, it was 7.1%, but only 2.3% in Seville. The Spanish government has so far released only the result of a first wave of rapid tests to determine the level of antibodies as a way to ascertain who has been infected. And that's the latest here in Barcelona, Spain. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you, Marco, and to our Spain Barcelona Bureau. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting from Barcelona, I am Marco Lipio. We live in interesting times.
And let's get the latest coronavirus situation in Russia. Joining us live from Moscow is Emmy Coloma. Hello, Emmy.
Hello, Alma. Good evening there.
Good evening from Manila. What are your updates for us?
Okay. Here's the latest update here in Russia. Daily new coronavirus cases in Russia fell below 10,000 for the first time in nearly 2 weeks on Thursday, offering hope for the country with the world's second most infections. Health officials registered 9,974 new cases in the last 24 hours, bringing the total of 252,245 confirmed infections. The number of daily cases in Russia has fallen several times this week, and Thursday tally was the first below 10,000 since May 3. Russia this week became the country with the second highest number of confirmed cases after the United States, in part due to massive testing campaign that has seen 6 million tests carried out. But the official fatality rate is low in comparison to countries like the United States, Britain, Italy, and Spain. But the official fatality rate, however, Russia's chief sanitary officer Anna Popova shut down the significance of the country having the second highest number of cases in the world. She argued that Russia's fatality rate from COVID-19 was 158.3 per 100,000 people, which puts the country well down on the list of 187 countries with confirmed cases. Meanwhile, Russian lawmakers have passed a bill to allow Russians to vote by mail or online for President Vladimir Putin's constitutional amendments that would allow him to stay in power through 2036. Lawmakers in the lower house, State Duma swiftly passed the bill in 3 readings Wednesday, meaning it needs a single vote for the upper house Federation Council before it lands on Putin's desk for signing into law. The Central Election Commission will also rule on whether remote voting is necessary. Several lawmakers have opposed the bill, saying there's no need to expedite the public vote. Meanwhile, the country's health minister announced that Russia plans to start clinical trials of vaccines for the novel coronavirus in June. Mikhail Murashko told the State Duma, the lower house of Russia's parliament, said scientists Mikhail Murashko told the State Duma, the lower house of Russia's parliament, said scientists working on the vaccine says the first batch could be available by late July. 5 top Russian officials, including Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin and Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, have already tested positive for COVID-19 over the past 2 weeks. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you, Emmy, for your updates, and excited to hear more from Russia. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Reporting from Moscow, Russia, this is Emmy Coloma, and we live in interesting times.
In Geneva, launching a policy brief on COVID-19 and mental health, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the virus is not only attacking physical health, it's also increasing psychological suffering. Joining us live from Geneva is Jim Hipolito. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Alma. Here's an update from the United Nations here in Geneva. The United Nations said decades of neglect and underinvestment in addressing people's mental health needs have been exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Spearheading the alert ahead of the upcoming World Health Assembly in Geneva, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged the international community to do much more to protect all those facing mounting mental pressures. Let's listen in.
But the COVID-19 virus is not only attacking our physical health, it is also increasing psychological suffering. Grief at the loss of loved ones, shock at the loss of jobs, isolation and restrictions on movement, difficult family dynamics, uncertainty and fear for the future. Mental health problems, including depression and anxiety, are some of the greatest causes of misery in our world. Throughout my life and in my own family, I've been close to doctors and psychiatrists treating these conditions. As Prime Minister of my country, Portugal, and as a Commissioner for Refugees, I became acutely aware of the suffering they cause. And this suffering is often exacerbated by stigma and discrimination, what is absolutely unacceptable. After decades of neglect and underinvestment in mental health services, the COVID-19 pandemic is now hitting families and communities with additional mental stress. Those most at risk are frontline health workers, older people, adolescents and young people, those with pre-existing mental health conditions, and those caught up in conflict and crisis. We must help them and stand by them. Even when the pandemic is brought under control, grief, anxiety, and depression will continue to affect people and communities. This is the background to the policy brief on COVID-19 and mental health that we are launching today. Mental health services are an essential part of all government responses to COVID-19. They must be expanded and fully funded. Policies must support and care for those affected by mental health conditions and protect their human rights and dignity. Lockdowns and quarantines must not discriminate against those with poor mental health. As we recover from the pandemic, we must shift more mental health services to the community and make sure mental health is included in universal health coverage.
According to the UN guidelines, depression and anxiety before the COVID-19 pandemic cost the global economy more than $1 trillion per year. Depression affects 264 million people in the world, while around half of all mental health conditions start by age 14, with suicide the second leading cause of death in young people aged 15 to 29. The UN paper also highlights a warning from the Lancet Commission on Global Mental Health and Sustainable Development that many people who previously coped well are now less able to cope because of the multiple stressors generated by the pandemic. All this is understandable given the many uncertainties facing people. The UN policy brief notes before identifying the growing use of addictive coping strategies, including alcohol, drugs, tobacco, and online gaming. WHO's Deborah Kestel said national data from populations around the world would appear to confirm this increased mental vulnerability, citing surveys showing an increase of prevalence of distress of 35% of the population surveyed in China, 60% in Iran, and 45% in the US. Much higher levels of depression and anxiety than normal were also recorded in Ethiopia's Amhara regional state last month. The WHO official continued, pointing to the estimated 33% prevalence rate of symptoms, a threefold increase compared to pre-pandemic levels. General symptoms caused by the COVID-19 include headaches, impaired sense of smell and taste, agitation, delirium, and stroke, according to the UN paper. Underlying neurological conditions also increase the risk of hospitalization for COVID-19. It notes while stress, social isolation, and violence in the family are likely to affect brain health and development in young children and adolescents. It adds that social isolation, reduced physical activity, and reduced intellectual stimulation increase the risk of cognitive decline and dementia in older adults. Alma?
All right. Thank you very much, Jim, for your update. Stay safe and stay healthy. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting for Geneva EBC Bureau, this is Jim Hipolito, and we live in interesting times.
They've been hailed as the heroes of the pandemic, working flat out to stave off the worst effects of the virus. Doctors and nurses around the world gave access to their hospitals and homes to AFP in Sao Paulo, Paris, Beirut, and Daegu. They tell us about their lives, their worries, and what keeps them going during the crisis as they go about their life-saving jobs. Take a look.
Les gars, il y a un arrêt cardiaque.
Toujours, comme je le disais, c'est toujours imprévisible. On a beau programmer notre journée, il y a toujours des événements qui font que des imprévus. Malheureusement ou heureusement, on s'attache au patient. C'est un patient qu'on a vu en ventilation spontanée, c'est-à-dire qu'il respirait par lui-même, qu'il pouvait communiquer avec nous. Donc on a pu discuter avec lui, connaître son mode de vie. Et donc c'est très dur, après avoir connu le patient, de se rendre compte que finalement il va décéder. C'est dans le contrat, hein, je le savais. Je savais qu'on ne pourrait pas sortir tout le monde, d'autant plus durant cette pandémie. Donc ça m'affecte, ça m'affectait beaucoup au début de cette épidémie. Sauf qu'on prend du recul sur cette maladie qu'on ne comprenait pas beaucoup. On ne comprend toujours pas complètement. Mais maintenant on sait qu'il y a des décès qui sont attendus, même en faisant au mieux. C'est mieux que les jours précédents, mais il reste quand même dans des situations graves.
Moi j'ai
Et j'ai l'air fatigué là sur la truc. Vous voyez pas, mais j'ai l'air fatigué. Ah oui, donc c'est possible que tu l'aies croisé alors qu'elle était symptomatique, quoi. Et donc tu vas prendre ta température 2 fois par jour. Ah, j'entends, merci beaucoup. Merci. Ça l'inquiète beaucoup. J'essaie de la rassurer pour lui dire que c'est pas forcément ce qui est décrit dans les médias, même si ça reste grave. Et donc j'essaie surtout de la rassurer à chaque appel. À chaque fois que je l'appelle, c'est aussi pour me rassurer. C'est un appel où on se rassure mutuellement. Parce qu'en vrai, quand on rentre, on est fatigué, hein, on va pas se le cacher. Donc c'est soit pâte sauce, soit des libéraux. Donc heureusement qu'il y a un très cher colocataire. Et en vrai, c'est vrai qu'on parle souvent de tout et n'importe quoi. Et ça te permet quand même de parler d'autres choses, quoi. C'est ça, ouais. Ça parle d'autres choses, de débats autres que le coronavirus. Ça fait du bien. Ah, tu manges finalement? Ah bon.
وهي لحظة انه انا جيت على الكورونا كنت وقتها بالدوام وقالوا لنا انه بكون مين بده يجي قلت له انا بتطوع وفت بالكورونا تيم فلما ما كنت مهيأ قبل نفسيا ما كنت مهيأ عائلتي ما كان معي ثياب ما كان معي شيء فتت دقيت لها لزوجتي قلت لها انه خلص انا رح ضل هون وللاسف رح ضل هالفترة انه بقدر اشوفكم فوت المريض بيجي بساعدك ماشي حطوه هون على اول شاريو وحنطلع على البيت اليوم اول يوم لانه حامل PCR حاطلع على البيت رح نعمل لهم سربرايز للفاميلي وللولاد اكيد رح يكونوا كثير مبسوطين ورح نفاجئهم فترة طويلة صار لي شهرين صحيح اني يمكن عند عالم مش قليل بس بالنسبة لي كانوا كتير كتار يعني فيك تقول سنتين فيك تقول شي 10 سنين كتير كتار انت الشاطرة الواعية الكبيرة ما هيك؟
그때 확진자가 매일매일 늘면서 이제 언제 끝날지도 모르고 하는데 딸은 항상 보고 싶은데 이제 사진을 그냥 잠도 안 오고 하니까 보니까 이제 동영상이랑 보다가 보니까 그냥 막연하게 아무 생각이 없었는데 눈물이 나더라고요. 그냥도 눈물이 났었던 것 같아요. 일이고요. 영웅이라고 저희 스스로 느끼기보다는 저희는 당연히 하고 있는 일을 하고 있을 뿐이라고 그렇게 항상 생각을 하고 있어요. 현관 앞에서 그냥 이제 저희가 장 봐서 지우 딸 우유 같은 거 이제 사고 넣어줄 때 그때 현관 앞에서만 보지 뭐 이제 꽉 껴안거나 그런 적은 없어요. 아, 정말요? 뭐 아빠 아니고 아빠 같아? 막막함하고 딸이 보고 싶고 가서 안아주고 싶고 같이 있어주고 싶은데 이제 제가 간호사니까 그러질 못하는 게 좀 마음 아파서 그랬던 것 같아요. 엄마는 안 보고 싶었어? Cada 5 lugares serve? Não, não tem.
Se toca o meu telefone, eu já tenho uma preocupação sabendo, será que alguém ficou doente? Entendeu? Será que tem mais algum médico que vai ser afastado? Entendeu? E se ele foi afastado, será que ele vai estar grave? Será que está bem? Será que não está? É uma preocupação que eu não tinha antes, entendeu? Em outras epidemias, né? A gente tinha uma equipe sólida que estava lá e eu não tinha esse tipo de surpresa. Está em potência, está elevado. Foi feito 6 horas depois, exatamente. A gente tem que passar a visita e discutir todos os casos, ver todos os casos todos os dias e testar praticamente a resposta terapêutica instituída em um no outro paciente. Porque não reflete a realidade.
contaminou. Esses outros melhorou ainda mais, não fez diferença.
Agora acho que eu posso dar um abraço de feliz aniversário. Beijão. Mudou as nossas relações, porque ambos estão na linha de frente e a gente sempre tem essa angústia, essa preocupação do que acontece quando a gente chega em casa. O que a gente pode estar trazendo para casa. Não tem um dia que eu não me desperte no meio da noite com angústia e preocupada, e não tem um dia que eu não acordo e falo que bom que eu ainda tenho saúde, que eu estou bem e que eu tenho coragem para poder enfrentar essa doença.
Tá bom. Oi. Eu vou acender as velas.
Eagle News will be right back.
Skyway Stages 1 and 2, the elevated toll road system project, run from a section of the South Luzon Expressway from Alabang to Magallanes, Makati. The Skyway Stage 3 is an elevated expressway connecting the South Luzon Expressway through the existing Skyway Stages 1 and 2 to the North Luzon Expressway via Balintawak. Skyway Stage 4 is an 80-kilometer mixed elevated and at-grade toll road that will connect the existing Skyway system starting from the FTI section all the way to Bulacan.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
UN Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development Elliot Harris said the global economy has come to a virtual standstill during the second quarter of 2020 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that the world is facing the grim reality of a severe recession. Let's listen in.
The global economic outlook, as you can well imagine, has changed drastically since the launch of the WESP 2020 in January of this year. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in the tragic loss of hundreds of thousands of lives while straining national healthcare systems around the world. With the large-scale restrictions of economic activities and heightened uncertainties, the global economy has come to a virtual standstill during the second quarter of 2020. We are now facing the grim reality of a severe recession, one of a magnitude not seen since the Great Depression. The twin health and economic crises present very difficult policy trade-offs. Governments need to contain the spread of the pandemic and, at the same time, they need to minimize its economic impacts. The balance between saving lives and saving jobs is as difficult as it is necessary to strike. In any event, unless there are major breakthroughs in vaccine development, economic activities will remain significantly limited, and any fiscal measure will be unlikely to be fully effective at stimulating investment and growth. How quickly and effectively the international community will be able to contain the public health and socio-economic fallouts of the pandemic will determine whether and how soon the world can return to pre-crisis levels of economic activity. In any event, we must now be ready to embrace a new normal in the future. And the path that the global recovery takes will decide whether that new normal can deliver world sustainable development by 2030. The prospects for this get dimmer with each day that the pandemic is not being brought under control.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell warns via webcast that there is a threat of a prolonged downturn in the economy and urges lawmakers in the White House to work on further government spending and tax policies to avoid long-term economic damage. Take a look.
While the economic response has been both timely and appropriately large, it may not be the final chapter, given that the path ahead is both highly uncertain and subject to significant downside risks. Economic forecasts are uncertain in the best of times, and today the virus raises a new set of questions. Additional fiscal support could be costly, but worth it if it helps avoid long-term damage and leaves us with a stronger recovery. This trade-off is one for our elected representatives who wield powers of taxation and spending. I have every reason to think we can get back there. The economy should substantially recover once the virus is under control. The scope and speed of this downturn are without modern precedent, significantly worse than any recession since World War II. We are seeing a severe decline in economic activity and employment, and already the job gains of the last decade have been erased. Since the pandemic arrived in force just 2 months ago, more than 20 million people have lost their jobs.
U.S. President Donald Trump said he finds top medical advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci's latest call for a highly cautious reopening not acceptable, as he promoted the reopening of schools during a meeting with the governors of Colorado and North Dakota in the cabinet room of the White House. Take a look.
That we were able to build our what we call North Dakota Smart
Testing. We just cracked 10 million tests, which is here. Interested in Space Force, and we were talking to some of them, and I was surprised by his answer, actually, because it's just, to me, it's not an acceptable answer, especially when it comes to schools. I think you should absolutely open the schools. Our country's got to get back, and it's got to get back as soon as possible. And I don't consider our country coming back if the schools are closed. And it's had very little, very unusual situation. It's had very little impact on young people. And I would strongly say they should open. It's up to the governors. It's the governor's choice. But their state is not open if the schools aren't open.
The Russian government announced an emergency handout of 23.4 billion rubles, or $316 million, for airlines struggling because of the coronavirus pandemic. President Vladimir Putin had already disclosed the amount of the planned handout from Russia's reserve fund, but the publication of a government decree allows airlines to apply for funding. Russia's Civil Aviation Agency said flagship airline Aeroflot had already applied for the funding. The government said Russian airlines can spend the money to cover outgoings, including salaries and costs of leasing planes. Russia began reducing international flights from late January, first to China and then to Europe. The number of international flights has fallen by 90% and domestic flights by 88%, according to President Putin. The Civil Aviation Agency said out of Russia's airlines, Aeroflot saw the biggest drop in passenger numbers in April, down more than 95% at around 148,000. All international flights were grounded in late March, although there have since been a few flights ferrying stranded Russians in and foreigners out. Domestic flights have continued, but some airlines, such as low-cost Pobeda, have opted to suspend all services, and the airline on Wednesday announced it will restart flights from June 1st. Singapore Airlines reported an annual loss of almost $150 million Thursday, driven by the collapse in air travel caused by the coronavirus pandemic and the latest sign of the outbreak's devastating impact on the aviation sector. The airline group, which includes subsidiaries Silk Air and SCOO, suffered a net loss of 212 million Singaporean dollars for the financial year that ended on March 31, compared to a profit of 683 million Singapore dollars last year. The city-state's flag carrier lost 732 million Singaporean dollars in the fourth quarter, mainly due to a reduction in passenger revenue as the virus crisis exploded. Fears about the spread of the virus, as well as global travel restrictions and border controls, led to the collapse in demand for air travel during the quarter, the airline said in its financial report. The recent collapse in oil prices also led to $710 million Singaporean dollars of fuel hedging losses in the fourth quarter. Singapore Airlines cut passenger capacity by 96% from April to June and grounded most of its fleet as people stopped flying due to the pandemic. The International Air Transport Association estimates that airlines operating in the Asia-Pacific region stand to lose a combined $27.8 billion of revenue this year. The trade body said last month that global air traffic suffered a 52.9% drop in March compared with the same period last year, the largest decline in recent history due to the coronavirus-related travel restrictions. And coronavirus cases in one of Asia's most populous slums, Mumbai's Dharavi, climbed past 1,000 late Wednesday after authorities said they were informed of 9 deaths that had occurred earlier. Now, the crowded neighborhood made famous in the 2008 Oscar-winning film Slumdog Millionaire now has 1,028 positive cases and 40 deaths, according to the Mumbai City Authority. Mumbai, the financial capital, has an official tally of 14,947 virus infections with 556 deaths. Next. And hairdressers, restaurants, and other stores reopened as New Zealand moves to level 2 on its 4th-year coronavirus alert system, with COVID-19 virus infection rates at almost 0. A long-awaited haircut was the top priority for many Kiwis after almost 2 months in isolation. Take a look.
Very excited, man. I miss this place and my clients as well. So I was looking forward to get back. Yeah, it's a great feeling. I've had some photos of clients who cut their partners or wives cut it for them. Terrible.
I think people are sort of looking to get back to normal, you know, sort of now, and being a level 2, it'll enable everyone to sort of at least function to a normal, you know, to a degree where, you know, you sort of got a normal life going.
So many of my customers would come in my other entrance, my little side entrance, because they've got a regular table, they sneak in there, they sit down. Well, we're going to have to change that. We're going to have to come in the front door, we're going to have to be very alert. Have you signed in? Have you done this? Are you? And it's a bit nannish, you know, parenting, you know. But I think we've done so well thus far. It would be a shame not to continue with these.
Retailers, restaurants, malls, cinemas, cafes, gyms, and playgrounds were all allowed to reopen after the government relaxed restrictions. The lockdown was among the tightest in the world, and it helped New Zealand become one of the most successful countries in containing the epidemic. Thursday's changes, which put New Zealand at level 2 on its 4th-year alert system, also allow Kiwis to break their quarantine bubble and meet up with friends and wider family members. Downtown streets in Wellington were once again jammed with traffic, although the usual crush on the capital's commuter trains was non-existent. Instead, red and green stickers were plastered on seats indicating where passengers could sit while still maintaining social distancing. New Zealand, with a population of 5 million, has recorded only 21 coronavirus deaths and kept new cases to single figures over the past month. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said she was hoping to catch up with her family face-to-face. Authorities have warned, though, that there is no place for complacency, and businesses of all types must use logbooks to record customer details in case there is an outbreak. And there are also stringent protocols surrounding the use of PPE and sanitizers that are likely to remain in force long-term. And before we close, we'll leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.